Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm giving this presentation of a paper which is still in progress, being written by Jennifer Wu and myself. We've called it Pulling Up the Ladder, Migrant Choices About Helping Others Migrate or Not. And I think, Godfried, in your presentation this morning, you gave examples of Moroccans in the Netherlands who had most definitely pulled up the ladder in the sense that they had managed to establish themselves in the Netherlands, and then they were not offering that opportunity to others who might want to follow in their footsteps. And I think we'll hear more about that in the next section, in the next paper. But what do we mean by help in this context? Of course, we thought about that in the project when we designed the questionnaire, and we've given it more thought in the context of this specific paper, and chosen to operationalize it in terms of actions that the person giving the help carries out to make it easier for somebody else to achieve an objective. So you hold out a hand to make it easier for your friend to cross a stream, because you assume that that's what they want to do. And help in this context is then linked to that person's aspirations. We've talked a lot about migration aspirations, and we see that as underlying the possibility of helping, because we have a lot of people orchestrating the migration of others in ways that are not necessarily very helpful. People telling their spouses or children that they have to migrate to another country, and they might be making that possible, but against the aspirations of the person, so then it's not considered help by us. We also talk about requests for help, but underline that those requests can be very subtle or implicit. So here in this illustration of a person crossing a stream, it could be just about using body language, signaling that you'll have some problems crossing on your own, and it would be useful if the person who's already crossed holds out a hand to make it easier. And that's what we hypothesize is happening in migration context as well, that we know that some non-migrants in the origin explicitly request help, call up their relatives and ask, can you help me find papers? But they might also request it in more subtle ways, simply by indicating that they would like to migrate and making it clear that help would be welcome. So we have these two actors, the potential beneficiary who might receive help and the potential provider who might give help. And it's essential that we consider both of them as actors, not just as one active and one passive part, but two people interacting. So then we're looking at two decisions. One decision about requesting help or not, even if it's a very subtle and implicit request, and then the subsequent decision about offering help in response to that request or not. And it seems reasonable to assume that both of those decisions are influenced by characteristics of both the potential beneficiary and the potential provider. So for instance, if we think of it help in a different context, I'm a sort of young mid-career researcher. If I say I wanted help from a more senior scholar to advance my career, and I would consider asking Godfried for help, for instance, that would, whether or not I do that would depend on my own characteristics. Do I want something that I think he can give me? And my assessments of his characteristics. Does he have the insight that I need? Is he a nice guy who would give it to me if I ask, and so on? And likewise, his decision to offer that assistance or not would depend both on his own attributes and on his perceptions of mine. But also, we're both influenced, of course, by our external environments, which might be the same or might be partly different. With our themis data, we can say something about those influences that I've highlighted here, because in the data that we use in this paper, we've only talked to the potential providers. But we can say something as well about who is being asked and who is not being asked. So moving on then to the data and the analysis. This is part of the Themis project, and by now I think you've all heard quite a bit about what the project is set up to achieve and how we've gone about that. So we have these 4 destinations and the 3 origins, which combine to 12 migration corridors, and we've selected them so that we have a nice variety of migration flows that are expanding and some that are stagnating, so we can see the network dynamics in different types of migration flows. The survey data that we use here is collected in the destination countries, so we have 2,860 interviews spread across these 12 corridors, so conducted in Norway, the UK, the Netherlands, and Portugal with Ukrainians, Moroccans, and Brazilians. What we've done in this paper is to pool the data by country of origin. We could have gone about this in different ways. We could have analyzed each of the 12 corridors separately. We could have pooled everything, or we could have pooled it by country of destination. But we reasoned that people's attitudes or to helping and helping practices are primarily influenced by where they come from, and then of course also affected by where they are, but we've chosen to pool by origin. So our regression tables would look like this, with 3 parallel analysis, 3 samples of around about 1,000 people in each. And then we control, of course, for the destination, and then the other variables that we're interested in, things that might influence whether or not they offer help. We can observe, what is this like among Brazilians, what is it like among Moroccans, and so on. The first thing we ask in this paper is who has actually been asked for help with migration documents and who has not been asked. We concentrate here on this one sphere of help with paperwork. And around 1/4 of the total of respondents have been asked for help by people in the country of origin concerning migration documents. Then we'll look at the people who have been asked and consider how many of them have actually provided help, and about 3/4 of them have. So already here we see that actually the agency involved in asking for help or not is in a way more influential on the final outcome than the agency involved in deciding to offer help or not in response to those requests. But this second question, of course, only concerns this relatively small subsample of people who have been asked. So going back out to the full sample, we also ask hypothetically, if someone were to ask you for help today concerning a migration document, would you offer it to them or not? And then we see about 3/4 of the people say that yes, they would. All of these proportions that I referred to here is for the whole sample of 2,800. The independent variables that we're interested in are, of course, in a way as a control, the destination country, and we see, for instance, that for some reason migrants in Portugal are more inclined to offer help than people from the same origin in other destinations. And more interesting theoretically is the variables that have to do with the respondents' own migration experience. So whether or not you have been helped yourself, for instance, in your own migration, does that affect your inclination to help others? And finally, we have variables that have to do with people's current circumstances. Under the migration experience, as I said, the question which in a way is most interesting in the context of the Themis project is precisely this one about whether people who have been helped by others in their own migration, and we operationalize that here by asking whether respondents before they migrated received information from a person at the destination. Many did, but many did not. Many sorted out their migration on their own or with the help of people in the country of origin, but some depended on help or received help in the form of information from somebody who was already at the destination. And then we have other questions about the motivations or context of migration. And under the current circumstances, we have sort of the control variables that you would expect in terms of current activity and age and so on, but we also have some that are more theoretically interesting, for instance, about their sociocultural integration. Does that affect their helping practices? The degree to which they primarily spend time with co-nationals, and also their way of interacting with people in the country of origin. And we've tried to operationalize that in a way that's clearly different from the help that we're trying to measure as an outcome. In all of this, we're using a data set, or 3 data sets, in which the unit of analysis is the respondent at the destination. But what we can do is to reshape the data set into a data set of requests, because we ask people about who has asked you for help and been given that help, and who has asked you for help and not been given that help. And that allows us to look at the outcome of specific requests for help with migration. And then we can see also what role do the characteristics of the potential beneficiary play. So in the final few minutes, I'll give you just a snapshot of some of the most interesting results, focusing then on this question of whether people who have been helped are more inclined to help others or not. Starting with the resilience, we see no significant effect on being asked. Maybe that's not so surprising, but we do see a strong effect on whether or not people have provided help in response to requests. So people who themselves received help in the form of information from others in their own migration have odds of helping others of almost 3 times people who were not helped themselves. And also their intention to help in a hypothetical situation is significantly higher. Then among Moroccans, we see no significant effects on helping intentions or helping practices of their own migration experience. It's reasonable to assume that this is partly because the length of stay in the destination is so much longer for Moroccans. Since they have, many of them, been at the destination for 10 or even 20 years, the link to their own migration experience is more distant in time. So we can also assume that the influence of that experience on their current behavior is weaker. But with Ukrainians, we see effects on all our measures of inclination to help. So Ukrainians who have received help in their own migration are more likely to be asked to help, more likely to give help if they are asked, more likely to intend to help in a hypothetical situation, and also when we look at the specific requests that they have fielded, they're more likely to have responded positively if they were helped themselves. Then about the potential beneficiary. Yes. There we look at the gender of the person asking and the gender of the person being asked, and we look also at the kinship relationship. So here I'll just show you the kinship relationship. So here we have 5 categories of relationship. Close family member, meaning spouse, parent, child, and then sibling, which is a very important category. Other relatives, friends or colleagues, and other non-relatives. And we use friends and colleagues as a reference category. Those account for the biggest number of requests. So people do get asked a lot for help by people they're not related to, but have some kind of not long-standing relationship with. And not surprisingly, you see this kind of pattern across all the 3 groups, but with slight variations. So close family members and siblings are much more likely to be helped when they request help. Other non-relatives are significantly less likely than people who are considered friends or colleagues. And we have specific categories of other non-relatives, and also specific categories in some of these others, of course. Moroccans, a similar picture, but no significant differences between the other relatives, friends, colleagues, other non-relatives. And Ukrainians, again, siblings, much more likely to be helped. Other non-relatives, less likely. One interesting thing I think across all these three is that whether you're an other relative or a friend or colleague has no significant impact. So it's only when kinship is close, at least at the level of siblingship, that it actually matters to the outcome. So I think that echoes a bit what we heard earlier, that these non-kin relationships are also very important. So in conclusion, just this single point, having been helped does increase your inclination to help others, but not if you're Moroccan. Thank you.